In the glittering world of New York's elite fortunes are built on steel, but they are shattered by secrets. For Amelia Thorne, life was a fairy tale spun from her husband's billion-dollar inheritance. She had the penthouse, the prestige, and a baby on the way. But one rainy Tuesday, a casual glance through a boutique window revealed a truth more brutal than any market crash. She saw her husband, Marcus Thorne, lavishing gifts not on her, but on another woman. Most wives would scream cry or file for divorce. Amelia did none of those. Her next move wasn't just about revenge. It was a masterclass in vengeance that would leave the entire Thorne dynasty and everyone who knew them utterly speechless. The rain fell on Fifth Avenue in relentless silver sheets, blurring the city lights into a watercolor painting of wealth and indifference. From her vantage point in the back of the chauffeured Maybach, Amelia Thorne watched the drops trace frantic paths down the bulletproof glass. Each drop was like a fleeting thought, a worry she couldn't quite hold on to. At 7 months pregnant, her world had contracted to the gentle rhythmic thumps she felt against her ribs and the ever-present low-grade anxiety that came with marrying into a family like the Thornes. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, was the heir apparent to Thorne Industries, a real estate and logistics empire built by his formidable father, Alistair Thorne. Marcus was handsome, charming, and had, for the first 3 years of their marriage, been impeccably attentive. He had pursued Amelia with a single-mindedness that had swept her off her feet. She, a Vassar art history graduate with a quiet disposition and a love for impressionist paintings, had seemed an unlikely match for the boisterous, charismatic scion of a corporate dynasty. But he'd claimed her calmness was the anchor his chaotic life needed. He'd called her his still point in a turning world. Lately, however, the world had been turning, and she was no longer his still point. He was distant, his phone perpetually silenced and face down on the nightstand. Business trips to Hong Kong and London became more frequent, his explanations for late nights at the office vague and clipped. He'd wave a dismissive hand. "You know, Dad, Amelia, the Sterling Coal merger is eating us alive." He'd kiss her forehead, his lips cool and brief, and the conversation would be over. She tried to blame it on the pressure on the impending weight of both fatherhood and the CEO title he was destined to inherit. She told herself this was the tax on a life of unimaginable luxury, the sprawling Central Park West penthouse, the staff that anticipated her every need, the black Amex that knew no limit. It was a gilded cage, and for the sake of their unborn son, she was willing to polish the bars and call it a home. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said to the driver, her voice soft, "could we stop for a moment? I see a new exhibit at the Guggenheim I'd like to inquire about." It was a lie. What she had really seen had made the breath catch in her throat. Across the street, sheltered under the iconic green awning of the luxury jeweler Van Cleef & Arpels, stood Marcus. He was laughing, his head tilted back in that carefree way he hadn't shown her in months. His arm was wrapped protectively around the waist of a woman who was decidedly not Amelia. This woman was tall and statuesque, with a cascade of platinum blonde hair that defied the day's humidity. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, a stark, fiery contrast to Amelia's elegant but maternal navy blue coat. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic counter-rhythm to the gentle kicks of her baby. It couldn't be. A business associate, a client. Her mind scrambled for a plausible explanation, a lifeline to pull her back from the abyss opening at her feet. Then she saw it. Marcus leaned in and tucked a stray strand of blonde hair behind the woman's ear, a gesture of casual intimacy, so familiar it felt like a physical blow. The woman smiled a dazzling, predatory smile and held up her wrist. Draped across it was a delicate, glittering bracelet, the Alhambra model with its signature clover motifs in mother-of-pearl. A piece Amelia had once pointed out in a catalogue only for Marcus to remark that it was a bit too delicate for her. The driver, oblivious, was pulling to the curb. "Here we are, Mrs. Thorne." Amelia's mind went eerily blank. The initial shock gave way to a cold, terrifying clarity. The rain, the traffic, the hum of the city, it all faded into a muffled drone. All she could see was the tableau across the street. Her husband, the father of her child, sharing a moment of intimate joy with another woman, purchased with a lie and a piece of jewelry meant for someone else. The woman leaned up and kissed Marcus a quick proprietary peck on the lips. He didn't pull away. He smiled, squeezing her waist, before opening the door to the jewelry store for her. Amelia's hand flew to her mouth, not to stifle a sob, but to hold back the acid taste of betrayal that rose in her throat. The fairy tale hadn't just ended. It had combusted, leaving behind the acrid smoke of deceit. Most women in her position would have stormed across the street, unleashing a torrent of fury and tears. They would have made a scene, demanding answers, shattering the public facade of their perfect life. But Amelia was not most women. She was a Thorne now, and she had learned one crucial lesson from her terrifyingly pragmatic father-in-law Alastair: emotion is a liability. Spectacles are for the powerless. A cold fire ignited in her veins, cauterizing the wound of her heartbreak with a sudden, chilling purpose. She felt her baby kick, again, a strong, insistent thump. It wasn't a flutter of life anymore. It was a reminder of what was at stake. This wasn't just about a cheating husband. This was about the future of her child, a future she would not allow to be compromised by this woman, or by Marcus's weakness. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice impossibly steady, devoid of the tremor that shook her entire body. "Change of plans. Take me to see Genevieve Davies, the officers at 707 6th Avenue. The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, a flicker of surprise in their professional calm. Genevieve Davies wasn't a friend. She wasn't a social acquaintance. She was one of the most feared divorce and asset forfeiture attorneys in the state of New York. "Right away, Mrs. Thorne," he replied smoothly, pulling back into the stream of traffic. As the Maybach glided away, Amelia didn't look back. She stared straight ahead, her mind already working, cataloging, planning. The art historian in her knew that to understand a masterpiece, you had to study its composition, its context, its hidden layers. Her marriage, she now realized, was a forgery, and she was about to become an expert in authenticating every lie, every transaction, every secret. The speechless-making move wouldn't be a scream on Fifth Avenue. It would be a silent, calculated dismantling of the life Marcus Thorne thought he controlled. The game had begun. The law offices of Davies, Steinberg, and Locke were the antithesis of the Thorne family's opulent old-world aesthetic. Located in a sleek glass tower, the space was a symphony of minimalist design, chrome white marble, and sharp angles. It was a place built for clinical precision, not emotional outpourings. It was exactly what Amelia needed. Genevieve "Jenna" Davies was a woman forged in the crucible of New York's most bitter divorces. Sharp, with an even sharper mind, she wore her salt-and-pepper hair in a severe bob that framed a face that rarely smiled but saw everything. She and Amelia had met at a charity gala years ago, a brief but memorable encounter where Jenna had sized up Amelia's position with unnerving accuracy in under 5 minutes. Alistair Thorne's daughter-in-law, Jenna, had said, stirring her drink, "I hope for your sake you have a cast-iron prenuptial agreement and a separate, untouchable trust in your own name." Amelia had laughed it off then. Now, sitting across from Jenna's imposing desk, the words echoed with prophetic weight. "He's cheating on me," Amelia said, foregoing any preamble. The words hung in the sterile air, sounding both monumental and pathetic. Jenna leaned back her chair, groaning softly. She didn't offer condolences or platitudes. She simply asked, "How do you know?" Amelia recounted the scene at Van Cleef and Arpels, her voice a low, controlled monotone. She described the woman, the dress, the laughter, the bracelet. She spared no detail, presenting the memory like evidence in a case file. When she finished, a single tear escaped and traced a hot path down her cold cheek. She wiped it away angrily. "The prenuptial agreement is Thorne's standard," Jenna stated, already pulling a file from a locked cabinet. "It's designed to protect the family fortune, not the spouse. In the event of infidelity, it provides for a severance, generous by any normal standard, a lump sum payment, a property settlement, but it's a golden parachute, not a stake. It's designed to make you go away quietly." "I have no intention of going away quietly," Amelia replied, her voice hardening. "And I don't want a severance. I want to understand." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Understand what? He's a rich, powerful man with a pregnant wife at home. It's a sordid, predictable classic. What's to understand?" "Everything," Amelia insisted. This wasn't a slip-up. Seeing them today, it felt practiced. "This is an established arrangement. I want to know who she is. I want to know how long. I want to know how deep it goes." She leaned forward, her eyes locking with the lawyer's. "I don't just want to react to the damage, Jenna. I want to know the full extent of the rot before I decide which part of the house to tear down." A slow, appreciative smile finally touched Jenna's lips. "All right, Mrs. Thorne. Now you're thinking like a litigator. Emotion is a weapon your opponent uses against you. Information is the weapon you use against him." For the next 2 weeks, Amelia's life took on a clandestine duality. To the world and to Marcus, she was the serene, expectant mother discussing nursery colors and prenatal yoga. She played her part with an Oscar-worthy performance, feigning fatigue, smiling at his hollow apologies for working so late. But in the quiet hours of the day, when Marcus was at the office and the household staff was busy, her penthouse apartment became a war room. Jenna's team was ruthlessly efficient. They started with a name. A facial recognition search using a high-resolution photo Amelia had discreetly snapped on her phone yielded a hit. The woman was Cassandra Jensen. Publicly, she was a brand consultant and social media influencer with a carefully curated online presence. Her Instagram was a gallery of exotic locales, exclusive parties, and sponsored posts for luxury brands. There were no pictures of Marcus, but the timeline was damning. A trip to Monaco in May coincided with Marcus's banking conference there. A week in Aspen in January matched his boys' ski trip. "She's a professional," Jenna explained over a secure video call, displaying a web of connections on the screen. "She caters to a very specific clientele of high-net-worth individuals. She provides companionship, discretion, and an ego boost. In return, they provide a lifestyle." But Amelia, with her art historian's eye for provenance and detail, knew there was more to it. The story didn't feel right. She began her own more personal investigation. She had access to all their joint accounts, access Marcus had never thought to revoke because he saw her as financially naive. With quiet determination, she began to sift through years of statements. Most of Marcus's spending was what she expected: restaurants, clubs, clothes. But then she found the anomalies. She wasn't looking for jewelry purchases or hotel bills; those were too obvious. She was looking for patterns, for things that were out of place. She found them not in the spending, but in the movements of money. There was a recurring wire transfer, not to a person, but to a holding company she didn't recognize: Argent Solutions, LLC. It wasn't for vast sums, but regular, consistent payments of $50,000 monthly. Too much for a simple allowance. It felt corporate. She dug deeper, cross-referencing dates. The payments had started 18 months ago. Around the same time, Marcus had begun to grow distant. Using a business database Jenna provided, Amelia looked up Argent Solutions, LLC. It was registered in Delaware, a ghost corporation with no public-facing operations. But the listed agent for service of process was a law firm known for specializing in corporate acquisitions and, more interestingly, hostile takeovers. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't a simple affair funded by petty cash. This was structured. This was a business arrangement. The next piece of the puzzle fell into place by accident. One evening, Marcus came home late, smelling of expensive scotch and Cassandra's perfume, a scent Amelia had identified as Frederick Malle's Portrait of a Lady. He tossed his briefcase onto a chair in the study, and a single sheet of paper fluttered out. He was too distracted, too consumed by his own lies to notice. After he was in the shower, Amelia retrieved it. It wasn't a love note or a hotel receipt. It was a geological survey report for a parcel of land in upstate New York near the Canadian border. The land was rich in cobalt, a mineral crucial for the production of high-capacity batteries. The report detailed promising exploratory drilling results. At the bottom of the page was a small printed memo: Project Nightingale, Phase 2 Analysis. Confidential. Project Nightingale. The name meant nothing to her. But Thorn Industries was primarily in real estate and shipping. A mining venture was completely outside their portfolio. This was a secret project. Amelia felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. She was standing at the edge of a conspiracy far larger than a marital indiscretion. The affair, the payments, the secret project, they were all connected. Cassandra Jensen wasn't just a mistress. Argent Solutions wasn't just a slush fund. She called Jenna immediately, her voice trembling with the enormity of her discovery. It's not just about cheating Jenna, it's something else. It's business. She explained about the holding company and the geological report. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Amelia, Jenna said, finally, her tone grim. Cobalt mining. Does the name Sterling Coal mean anything in that context? It's the merger. Amelia breathed, her mind racing. Alistair and Marcus are always talking about it. Thorn is acquiring Sterling Coal Logistics to expand their shipping routes into the Great Lakes. Sterling Coal's parent company, SC Global, has been trying to break into the green energy market for years, Jenna said, the sound of furious typing in the background. They've been quietly buying up mineral rights all over North America. If they could secure a major domestic cobalt source, it would make them a powerhouse. And if Thorn Industries were to acquire that land secretly before acquiring Sterling Coal, they'd be buying a logistics company and getting a billion-dollar mine for pennies on the dollar. It would be the deal of the century. It would also be insider trading and corporate espionage on a massive scale if not handled perfectly. A horrifying tapestry began to weave itself in Amelia's mind. Marcus wasn't just having an affair. He was involved in a high-stakes secret corporate maneuver, and Cassandra Jensen was somehow at the heart of it. Was she helping him? Or was she a player in her own right, with her own agenda? The monthly payments to Argent Solutions LLC suddenly looked less like an allowance for a mistress and more like a retainer for a consultant. A consultant in what seduction deceit, corporate espionage. Amelia stood in the silent, cavernous penthouse, the geological report clutched in her hand. The city lights twinkled below a sea of indifferent stars. She had wanted to understand the rot. Now she was staring into the abyss of it. Her plan could no longer be about a simple, clean divorce. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. This was about the future of the Thorn Empire and a secret worth billions. And she, the quiet art historian, was the only one who held the map. The Thorn family's annual foundation dinner was the crown jewel of the New York philanthropic scene. It was a night of performative charity where millions were pledged between bites of seared foie gras and sips of vintage Bordeaux. It was also a night of power brokering held in the grand ballroom of the family's Upper East Side mansion, a limestone fortress that had belonged to Alistair Thorne's father. This year, the theme was legacy, a bitter irony that was not lost on Amelia. For 2 weeks, she had lived with the explosive knowledge of Project Nightingale, the monthly payments, and Cassandra Jensen's true potential role in the scheme. She had watched Marcus move through their life with the blithe arrogance of a man who believed his secrets were safe. He was more attentive now, as if sensing a subtle shift in her, but misinterpreting it as pregnancy-related neediness. He brought her flowers, massaged her swollen ankles, and spoke with saccharine excitement about their son. Each tender gesture felt like a fresh coat of paint on a rotten wall. Amelia had decided against a quiet confrontation. A private fight would allow him to lie, to gaslight her, to control the narrative. No, the takedown had to be as public and as curated as the life he had built. It had to happen in the one place he was most vulnerable, under the watchful, unforgiving eye of his father. She chose her dress with the precision of a general choosing his armor. It was a custom-made gown by Carolina Herrera in a deep amethyst silk. It was modest, yet regal, accentuating her baby bump, not as a vulnerability, but as a symbol of the dynasty's future. She wore the Thorn sapphires, a set of jewels given to her by Alistair himself on her wedding day. She was not a scorned wife tonight. She was the matriarch in waiting, playing her role to perfection. The ballroom was a glittering sea of familiar faces, bankers, politicians, and society doyens. Marcus was in his element, gliding through the crowd, a charming word for everyone. He kept pulling Amelia to his side, showcasing her like a prized possession. "My beautiful wife," he would say, placing a possessive hand on the small of her back, "we're so excited for the next generation of Thorn." Amelia would smile serenely, a silent storm raging within her. Dinner was served. The string quartet played Vivaldi. Speeches were made. Alistair Thorne, a man who commanded silence with his mere presence, spoke of integrity, family, and the enduring strength of their legacy. He looked directly at Amelia as he spoke of family, a glimmer of what she thought was approval in his cold, grey eyes. The moment came after dessert, as coffee was being served. It was the part of the evening where the family would traditionally gather at their main table with their closest business associates, the inner circle. Tonight, that included the CEO of their primary lending bank and a powerful board member. Amelia waited for a lull in the conversation. She placed her hand on Marcus's arm. "Darling," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the relative quiet. "There's a small matter I was hoping we could clear up. A financial question, really." Marcus froze. A flicker of panic crossed his face. "Amelia, darling, this really isn't the time or place." "Oh, but I think it is," she replied, her smile unwavering. "It's about legacy after all, and our family's financial health." She turned her gaze to her father-in-law. "Alistair, perhaps you can shed some light. I was reviewing our accounts, trying to be a more responsible partner in our financial future, and I came across a curious entity, Argent Solutions LLC. Marcus has been making substantial monthly payments to them, $50,000 a month for 18 months. I'm not familiar with this particular Thorn subsidiary." The air at the table grew thick and still. The banker shifted uncomfortably. Alistair's eyes, like chips of granite, narrowed on his son. Marcus's face had drained of all color. He looked like a cornered animal. "It's a consultancy," Marcus stammered, his voice tight, "for the Sterling Coal merger. Very sensitive. We needed outside expertise." "I see," Amelia said, tilting her head. "A consultancy. I was so intrigued I had my lawyer Genevieve Davies look into it." She let the name drop like a stone into a silent pond. The mention of a divorce attorney was an unmistakable declaration of war. "It seems Argent Solutions is a shell corporation, and its primary beneficiary, the consultant, is a woman named Cassandra Jensen." She paused, letting the name hang in the air. She didn't need to show pictures. She didn't need to scream. Her calm, surgical delivery was far more devastating. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at his father, his expression pleading. Alistair Thorn did not look at his son. His gaze was fixed on Amelia, a terrifying mixture of fury and calculation in his eyes. The public humiliation was a cardinal sin in his world, but the mention of a name connected to a secret financial arrangement was something far worse. Amelia pressed on, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that forced everyone at the table to lean in. "I found it so fascinating. This consultant seems to have a very hands-on approach. She was with you on Tuesday, wasn't she, Marcus, at Van Cleef & Arpels? You bought her a lovely bracelet. I must say, darling, your generosity to your consultants is truly astounding." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so profound that the distant strains of Vivaldi felt like a funeral dirge. The banker looked at his plate as if it held the secrets to the universe. Marcus was visibly trembling, his facade completely shattered. Finally, Alistair spoke. His voice was dangerously soft, a silken threat. "Marcus, is this true? Father, I can explain." "Is it true?" Alistair repeated, cutting him off. Marcus deflated his shoulders, slumping in defeat. "Yes." Alistair's jaw clenched. For a fleeting second, Amelia saw a flash of pure, unadulterated rage in his eyes before it was replaced by an icy control. He turned his attention back to Amelia. He wasn't looking at a daughter-in-law anymore. He was looking at a new, unknown player on the board. "And what is it you want, Amelia Barton?" He asked, the question laced with steel. This was the moment. Her next move. Everyone expected tears, demands for a divorce, a play for half the fortune. "Want," Amelia said, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. She placed a protective hand on her belly. "I want to protect my son's legacy. A legacy that seems to be entangled not just in infidelity, but in very curious business practices." She met Alistair's gaze without flinching. "I found something else, you see. A geological report. For a project called Nightingale." If her previous statement had been a bomb, this was the fallout. Alistair's composure finally cracked. A muscle twitched in his cheek. He knew, of course he knew. This was his play. Marcus was just the pawn. "I don't want a divorce settlement, Alistair," Amelia said, her voice dropping so only he and a now petrified Marcus could hear. "I don't want to go away. I want in. I want a board seat on the Thorn Foundation. I want an independent, non-revocable trust established for my son, funded immediately with me as the sole trustee. And I want to be briefed on every single aspect of Project Nightingale, because it seems the greatest threat to the Thorn legacy isn't an outsider. It's the secrets you're keeping within it." She had done it. She had turned a marital betrayal into a corporate negotiation. She had bypassed the cheating husband and gone straight to the king. She had used their own sacred rule, protect the legacy at all costs, against them. She wasn't asking for money to leave. She was demanding power to stay. Alistair Thorn stared at her for a long, heavy moment. The fury in his eyes was slowly being replaced by something else, a cold, hard, reluctant respect. He had underestimated her. They all had. He rose slowly from the table. "Marcus, my study, now." He then looked at Amelia, his expression unreadable. "You and I will speak tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. My office. Don't be late." He turned and walked away, his back ramrod straight, leaving a wake of shattered silence and stunned faces. Marcus, pale and broken, stumbled after him like a condemned man. Amelia remained seated, her hand resting on her unborn son. She had done more than cause a scene. She had orchestrated a coup. And, in the silent, glittering ballroom, surrounded by the ruins of her marriage, she had never felt more powerful. The speechless moment had been delivered. But the real drama, she knew, was just beginning. The aftermath of the dinner party was a chilling silence. The guests had dispersed with the hurried, gossiping energy of people who had just witnessed a public execution. Marcus did not return to the penthouse that night. Amelia didn't expect him to. She slept soundly for the first time in weeks, the righteous exhaustion of a successful campaign settling over her. The next morning, she arrived at the Thorn Industries headquarters at 9:55 a.m. The building was a monument to Alistair's ego, a black glass monolith on Park Avenue that seemed to suck the light from the sky. She was escorted directly to the top floor to Alistair's office, a vast, intimidating space with a panoramic view of the city he considered his kingdom. Alistair was waiting for her, standing by the window. He didn't offer her a seat. "You have created a significant problem," he said, his voice as cold as the glass he was looking through. "No," Amelia corrected him calmly. "I exposed a problem that already existed. There's a difference." "Semantics," he shot back, turning to face her. "You humiliated my son. You aired our private affairs in front of my most important associates. Your son's private affairs were threatening our collective future," she retorted, her voice firm. "My son's future. The humiliation was a necessary tool to get your attention. It clearly worked." Alistair studied her, his grey eyes piercing. "What do you know about Project Nightingale?" "I know it's a secret cobalt mining venture. I know it's the hidden asset in the Sterling Coal acquisition. And I know your son's mistress, Cassandra Jensen, is somehow involved. My question to you, Alistair, is how and why was Marcus, the heir to the throne, so reckless as to mix a billion-dollar secret with a cheap affair?" Alistair's expression soured at the mention of his son's incompetence. "Marcus is weak," he said, the words dripping with contempt. "He has my name, but he lacks my discipline. He was supposed to manage the acquisition of the land discreetly. He was meant to be the face of the deal, using a third party to avoid any connection to Thorn Industries before the merger was complete, and he chose Cassandra Jensen's shell company for that, Amelia asked, incredulous. He funneled money through his mistress. It was then that the door to the office opened. Marcus walked in, looking like a ghost. His eyes were red-rimmed, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked defeated, stripped of all his usual charisma. He couldn't meet Amelia's eyes. "Tell her," Alistair commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Tell her the whole pathetic story." Marcus finally looked at Amelia, his expression a wretched mix of shame and desperation. "It wasn't like that," he began, his voice hoarse. "I didn't hire Cassandra. She found me." He explained that he had met Cassandra Jensen at a conference in Geneva nearly 2 years ago. She was intelligent, beautiful, and uncannily perceptive about the pressures he faced. She made him feel seen in a way he claimed he hadn't in years. The affair began a textbook case of a straying, wealthy husband. But then, about 6 months in, the dynamic shifted. Cassandra revealed that she knew things she shouldn't know. She knew about Project Nightingale in its infancy. She knew the name of the geologist Marcus had been secretly consulting. She presented her knowledge not as a threat, but as an offer. "She told me she could help," Marcus said, pacing the room like a caged animal. "She said her company, Argent Solutions, specialized in discrete acquisitions. She had contacts, legal structures in place to ensure absolute anonymity. She said a project this sensitive couldn't be handled by the usual Thorn lawyers. It needed a layer of separation, someone untraceable." Amelia felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. "And you believed her?" "I was in too deep," he exclaimed, his voice cracking. "The affair, she could have used it to expose me at any time. But she was clever. She never framed it as blackmail. She framed it as a partnership. She made me feel like we were partners in this secret, brilliant venture. She said, if we pulled it off, I would finally step out of my father's shadow. It would be my victory." This was the twist Amelia hadn't seen coming. Marcus wasn't just a cheat. He was a fool who had been expertly manipulated. Cassandra Jensen wasn't just a mistress he'd hired. She was a predator who had targeted him, seduced him, and then entangled him in her own web, using his biggest secret as leverage. So the payments to her company weren't for her silence about the affair, Amelia breathed, connecting the dots. They were her fee for managing the acquisition. "Yes," Marcus admitted, his head bowed in shame. "She controlled the flow of information. She was the intermediary between me and the landowners. She handled the paperwork through Argent Solutions." Alistair, who had been listening with a thunderous expression, finally spoke. "The woman is not just a courtesan. She's a corporate mercenary. And my son, my brilliant heir, handed her the keys to the most sensitive deal in this company's history." The full, horrifying scope of the situation finally settled over the room. Cassandra Jensen wasn't just a threat to Amelia's marriage. She was a threat to the entire Thorn empire. She had Marcus trapped by the affair, and she had the company trapped by her intimate knowledge of and control over Project Nightingale. If she were to walk away, or worse, go to Sterling Coal's parent company SC Global, with what she knew, the deal would be dead. Thorn Industries would face SEC investigations, and the Thorn name would be dragged through the mud for attempting market manipulation. "She's been bleeding the project," Alistair added, his voice grim. "Padding expenses, overinflating legal fees through her own network." Marcus was too compromised and too stupid to notice. "I only realized the cost overruns last month and began my own quiet investigation. You, Amelia, simply brought the crisis to a head." Amelia looked from the broken man, who was her husband, to the ruthless patriarch, who was her father-in-law. The lines of battle had been redrawn. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a hostage negotiation. Cassandra Jensen held all the cards. She had Marcus by his infidelity and Alistair by his ambition. What does she want? Amelia asked, her mind already shifting from victim to strategist. We don't know her endgame, Alistair admitted, a rare concession of uncertainty. A larger payout. A permanent stake in the project. Whatever it is, she now knows we're aware of her. Your little dinner party performance sent a clear signal. She will make her move soon. A heavy silence descended. Marcus looked at Amelia, a desperate, pathetic hope in his eyes, as if she could somehow fix the mess he had created. Alistair stared out the window, his mind clearly racing through gambits and countermeasures. It was in that moment that Amelia saw the path forward. It was a terrifying, audacious path, one that would require her to ally herself with the very man who represented the cold, oppressive world she had once feared. Her initial plan to secure a trust for her son and a place at the table now seemed laughably small. The house wasn't just rotting, it was on fire. And to save her son's inheritance, she would have to run into the flames. She took a deep breath. You're both approaching this from the wrong angle, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Both men turned to look at her. You see Cassandra as a problem to be managed, a threat to be paid off or neutralized. You're trying to figure out her price. She walked towards Alistair's desk, placing her hands on the cool, polished wood. But a woman like that, a true predator, isn't just after money. Money is a tool. She's after power. She doesn't want to be a consultant who gets a fee. She wants to be the one who owns the mine. And she has played you both perfectly to get there. Amelia looked from father to son. Marcus, she used your ego and your weakness. Alistair, she used your ambition and your blind spot for your own son's incompetence. You've both been outmaneuvered, but you have one asset she doesn't know how to handle. And what is that? Alistair asked, his tone skeptical but intrigued. Amelia smiled, a cold, confident expression that was entirely new. Me. The statement hung in the air of Alistair Thorne's office, audacious and utterly unexpected. Me. Alistair stared at her, a flicker of disbelief crossing his stern features before being replaced by intense scrutiny. Marcus just looked confused, a man lost in a game whose rules kept changing. You, Alistair finally said, his voice laced with skepticism. You are a pregnant art historian who until last night was nothing more than a victim in this sordid affair. What asset could you possibly be? That's exactly it, Amelia replied, her confidence growing. I am the one person in this equation that Cassandra Jensen has completely underestimated. To her, I am the meek, unsuspecting wife. The collateral damage. She has a plan for Marcus the Fool. She has a plan for you, the Titan. She does not have a plan for me. I am the variable she didn't account for. She began to pace slowly in front of the vast window, her silhouette framed against the New York skyline. You are both compromised. Marcus is emotionally and legally entangled with her. He's useless. You, Alistair, are bound by the rules of corporate warfare. You'll try to outbid her, threaten her with lawyers, dig up dirt on her. It's predictable. She's anticipated all of it. That's why she has you in checkmate. What are you proposing? Alistair asked, his tone shifting from dismissive to grudgingly curious. I am proposing an alliance, Amelia said, turning to face him directly. Not an alliance of friendship, an alliance of mutual interest. Our interests are for the moment perfectly aligned, protect the Thorne legacy, and neutralize Cassandra Jensen permanently. Marcus made a move to speak, perhaps to object or agree, but Alistair silenced him with a single, cutting glare. "Continue," he said to Amelia. "Cassandra's power comes from the information she holds and the positions she's put you in," Amelia explained, laying out her strategy. "We can't take that power by force. We have to make her give it up willingly. We need to set a new trap, one she won't see coming, because the bait will be something she doesn't realize she wants." "And what is that?" "Legitimacy," Amelia stated. "Right now, she's a mistress, a backroom dealer operating through shell companies. It's lucrative, but it's a precarious existence. A woman that ambitious doesn't want to be a parasite forever. She wants to be the host. She wants a seat at the table." "Your table?" Amelia's plan was as devious as it was brilliant. She proposed that instead of fighting Cassandra, they should appear to surrender to her. Marcus, coached by Amelia and Alistair, would go to Cassandra and confess everything. He would tell her that his father knew about the affair and Project Nightingale, and that Alistair, in a fit of rage, had disowned him. He will tell her that his father is planning to cut him out of the will and the company entirely, Amelia elaborated. He will present himself as a broken man, terrified of losing everything. But he will tell her he has a plan. He will offer to betray his own father. The proposed plan was this: Marcus would offer to steal the final geological and feasibility data for Project Nightingale, the most sensitive data that Alistair still held, and give it to Cassandra. In exchange for this ultimate act of betrayal, she would use her control over the land acquisition to lock Alistair out completely. They would then take the entire project complete, with the stolen data, to a rival investor, not Sterling Coal's parent company, which would raise too many red flags, but a third-party venture capital firm. They would build their own empire, leaving Alistair with nothing but a failed merger and a worthless logistics company. Alistair listened, his expression unreadable. "You want my son to propose corporate treason, using my most valuable data as bait?" "Precisely," Amelia confirmed. "It's a play that appeals directly to her ego. It recasts her from a mere blackmailer into a kingmaker. It gives her what she truly craves, the chance to topple the great Alistair Thorne and install her puppet Marcus on a new throne of her own making." "It's insane," Marcus breathed, shaking his head. "She'll never believe it." "She will," Amelia countered, turning to him, "because it preys on her perception of you. She already sees you as weak, resentful of your father, and easily led. This is the logical next step in her manipulation of you. You won't be acting Marcus. You will simply be playing the part she wrote for you." Alistair was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. He was looking at Amelia with new eyes, seeing past the society wife to the keen, strategic mind beneath. She had not only diagnosed the problem with chilling accuracy, but had also devised a solution that was both psychologically astute and breathtakingly ruthless. She was proposing to use his own son as a sacrificial lamb to lure their enemy into a trap. It was a move he would have made himself. "And when she agrees," Alistair asked, "when she has the stolen data and meets with this new investor?" "The investor will of course be one of your own people," Amelia said, a faint smile on her lips. "The meeting will be fully recorded. At that meeting, Marcus will not only get her to admit to the entire scheme of blackmail and corporate espionage on tape, but he will also get her to sign documents transferring control of Argent Solutions and the land rights to a new entity. She will think she is signing a partnership agreement with the new investor. In reality, she will be signing her confession and handing us back everything she stole." The sheer audacity of the plan filled the room. It was a high-wire act with no safety net. If any part of it failed, they would all be ruined. And your price in all this, Amelia? Alistair finally asked, the question hanging in the air. My son's trust is shattered. Your marriage is over. What do you get for orchestrating this victory? Amelia met his gaze, her expression hardening. The time for negotiation was back. My previous demands stand, she said. The irrevocable trust for my son fully funded. The board seat on the foundation. But now I want more. Go on. I want a controlling interest in Project Nightingale. Not for me, for the trust, my son's trust. Once the asset is secured from Cassandra, it will be placed in a holding company where my son is the majority shareholder and I am the sole director with full operational control until he comes of age. You and Thorn Industries will have a minority stake, paying me a fee for managing it. It was an incredible demand. She was asking not just for security, but for control over the billion-dollar asset at the heart of the entire crisis. She was demanding to be made a queen in her own right within their empire. You are asking me to hand over the single greatest venture of my career to you. Alistair stated, his voice dangerously low. I am the only one who can deliver it to you, Amelia replied without blinking. You can have a minority stake in a billion-dollar success or a majority stake in a catastrophic failure and a federal investigation. Your choice. A long, tense silence stretched. Marcus looked back and forth between his wife and his father, a spectator at his own immolation. He had been rendered irrelevant, a mere pawn in a game played by two masters. Finally, Alistair let out a short, sharp exhalation that might have been a laugh. You should have been my son, he said, a strange, chilling glimmer of admiration in his eyes. He extended a hand across the desk. You have an alliance, Amelia. Amelia shook his hand. It was cold and firm. The deal was struck. The unholy alliance between the vengeful wife and the ruthless patriarch was forged. Their shared enemy, Cassandra Jensen, was about to discover that the quiet, pregnant woman she had dismissed as collateral damage was in fact the most dangerous player in the game. The execution of Amelia's plan began with the meticulous stagecraft of a Broadway production. Marcus coached relentlessly by Amelia, and Alistair was the lead actor, and his performance had to be flawless. The first step was the manufactured breakdown. He called Cassandra from a burner phone, his voice choked with a convincing blend of panic and rage. He told her everything, just as Amelia had scripted. He knows. My father knows everything. The affair, the project, he's going to ruin me, Cassandra. He's cutting me out. As predicted, Cassandra's initial reaction was wary, but her ego and her low opinion of Marcus made her susceptible. She saw an opportunity. When Marcus, weeping with desperation, proposed betraying his father and stealing the final data to build their own empire, she took the bait. The predator sensed that her prey was finally ready to turn on its own pack. She agreed to a final meeting to cement their new, treacherous partnership. The chosen location was the penthouse suite of the Baccarat Hotel, a neutral ground that oozed the kind of decadent luxury Cassandra favored. The suite was swept for bugs by Alistair's security team, and then fitted with their own high-definition concealed recording equipment. The venture capital team, led by a silver-haired, pinstripe-suited senior partner from Alistair's own M&A department, was prepped and waiting in an adjacent suite. Amelia watched the entire scene unfold from a command center set up in a hotel room 2 floors below. Alongside Alistair Sawyer and Jenna Davies, she monitored a bank of screens showing multiple camera angles and audio feeds. She was the director watching her play come to life. Her heart pounded a steady, anxious drum against her ribs. Everything hinged on this moment. Cassandra arrived, looking triumphant. She wore a white power suit, an angel of corporate destruction. She greeted Marcus not with a lover's embrace, but with the cool, appraising look of a boss taking measure of a subordinate. "Did you bring it?" she asked, her voice smooth as silk. Marcus, his face pale and clammy, slid a sleek metal briefcase across the table. "It's all there. The final survey data, the feasibility reports, the extraction cost analysis. Everything my father has." Cassandra's eyes lit up with avarice. This was the prize. This was everything. The investor, Mr. Peterson, entered the room playing his part as the discreet, powerful money man to perfection. For the next hour, they talked. Guided by leading questions from Marcus and Peterson, Cassandra laid out her entire scheme. She gloated. She recounted how she had targeted Marcus, how she had leveraged the affair, how she had siphoned money from the project through Argent Solutions. She detailed her plan to use the data to secure funding and cut Thorn Industries out completely. It was all there, a clear and damning confession captured in crystal-clear audio and video. "The beauty of it is," Cassandra said, a smug smile on her face, "is that Alistair Thorn will never see it coming. He's too arrogant to believe his own son would ever truly defy him." Then came the final act. Peterson produced a set of documents. "This is our partnership agreement," he explained. "It transfers the assets held by Argent Solutions LLC, namely the land options for Project Nightingale, into our new joint venture, a formality before we wire the initial seed funding." Cassandra, blinded by her imminent victory, scanned the documents. Her greed had made her careless. She saw the name of the new venture capital entity, the funding amounts, the partnership percentages. She didn't scrutinize the fine print, the complex legal clauses drafted by Jenna Davies herself. She signed each page with a flourish. The moment her pen lifted from the last page, Mr. Peterson smiled faintly. "Thank you, Miss Jensen. I believe our business is concluded." He picked up the documents and the briefcase of data and exited the suite. Cassandra looked at Marcus, her smile triumphant. "We did it, Marcus. We actually did it." Marcus didn't smile back. He just stared at her, his expression slowly changing from fear to a kind of exhausted emptiness. At that moment, the door to the suite opened again. But it wasn't room service. Amelia walked in, followed by Alistair Thorn and Jenna Davies. The color drained from Cassandra Jensen's face. The triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure shock and dawning horror. She looked from Amelia's serene, pregnant form to Alistair's cold, victorious stare. Her eyes darted around the room, finally understanding the trap. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "This," Amelia said, her voice calm and steady, "is called a checkmate." Jenna Davies stepped forward and placed a folder on the table in front of Cassandra. "Those documents you just signed weren't a partnership agreement," the lawyer stated coolly. "They were a full confession and a legally binding transfer of all assets and controlling interest in Argent Solutions LLC to a trust controlled by Mrs. Amelia Thorn. You have voluntarily relinquished all rights to Project Nightingale. Furthermore, we have a full recording of this meeting, including your admission to blackmail conspiracy to commit corporate espionage and fraud. We have enough to ensure you'll be spending the next decade in a federal prison." Cassandra stared at the documents, then back at the three figures standing before her, a trinity of judgment. Her empire, built on deceit and seduction, had crumbled to dust in a single afternoon. However, Alistair said, his voice dripping with ice, "We are prepared to be merciful. You will disappear. You will relinquish the keys to your apartment, the cars, the jewelry, all of which was purchased with funds defrauded from my company. You will sign a permanent, irrevocable, non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, we will not release the tapes or press charges. If we ever hear your name again in any context, this mercy will be revoked." Am I clear? Cassandra was broken. The fight was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed terror of total defeat. She gave a single, jerky nod. An hour later, it was over. Cassandra Jensen was gone, erased from their lives as cleanly as a line of code. In the silent penthouse suite, only Amelia Alistair and Marcus remained. The adrenaline faded, leaving a strange quiet in its wake. Alistair looked at Amelia, the architect of his salvation. "You delivered," he said, the highest form of praise he was capable of giving. "The asset is secure. The trust will be established by the end of the week, with you in control as we agreed." Amelia nodded, placing a hand on her belly. She had won. She had secured her son's future, not as a recipient of Thorn charity, but as a power player in his own right. Then she turned to Marcus, who had been standing by the window, a silent, pathetic figure. Their eyes met for the first time since the ordeal began. The love was gone, replaced by a chasm of betrayal and regret. "Our marriage, however, is over," she said, her voice soft but final. "You will not be a part of our son's daily life, Marcus. You can be a father, but you will never again be my husband. Jenna will have the divorce papers drawn up." He simply nodded, accepting his fate. He had not only lost his mistress and his father's respect, he had lost his wife and his family. He was a king with no kingdom, a man left with nothing but the consequences of his own weakness. Amelia walked out of the hotel, leaving the two Thorn men behind in the monument to her victory and their failure. As she stepped into the waiting car, the city lights seemed to shine brighter. She was no longer the quiet, unassuming wife, living in a gilded cage. She had seen the rot in her fairy tale, and instead of fleeing, she had burned the castle down and built a fortress on its ashes. She was Amelia Thorn, and her next move had not just left everyone speechless, it had changed the game forever. And so the story of Amelia Thorn comes to a close. But is it really an ending or a beginning? She traded a flawed marriage for a financial empire, transforming from a betrayed wife into a formidable matriarch, all to protect the legacy of her unborn child. She proved that in a world of powerful men, the most dangerous player on the board can be the woman everyone underestimates. Her story is a chilling reminder that vengeance is a dish best served cold, calculated, and with a controlling interest. What do you think of Amelia's final move? Was it brilliant justice or a cold-hearted power grab? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this tale of drama, betrayal, and ultimate revenge, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger than fiction. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an update.